Hello and welcome to the Witch Source. And I am so excited to have with me today Miss Aida. And we are going to talk about Samhain. And so I'm super excited about that because it's right around the corner as we celebrate it here in the States. But I think we might learn some surprising things as we go along. So, Miss Aida, would you like to take it away?
Sure. So I done a lot of research on the topic, because it's such a great holiday, and fall has always been my favorite season of the year. I mean, I loved Halloween. I loved October 31st because I'd go out with a costume and then I'd come back and throw a sheet over myself and go back out again. I was a cheat.
Fun.
So the way I've learned it is Samhain, we really don't know exactly when it started, okay? But it celebrates the summer's end, right? So it was like the pagan New Year.
Right.
And what it really is a full moon closest to October 31st. So Halloween is October 31st, right? But
Right.
Samhain is a full moon closest to October 31st, which, in my opinion, was yesterday, October 17th, because not only did we have a full moon, we had a super full moon.
Yes, we did. It was huge.
And it was like, wow, yesterday was like a weird day, and so it's kind of cool, but 2,000 years ago. Now, again, I'm not telling you it started 2,000 years ago. I'm just giving you some of the history. Like 2,000 years ago, like in the Irish territory, that territory, it was a huge holiday. And it was almost like a politician's rally because all the politicians were there, and
Okay.
vendors were there. And the difference between our rallies here and their rallies there is if people did not attend the celebration, and they would be threatened that a higher power would come and take their lives. So people were intimidated, and they attended. So it was, vendors were there, people that tried to sell. I mean, it was just just picture a big festival where you've got the what do you call them, kiosk or whatever. I mean, stuff like that's going on. Politicians are talking. But, they also celebrated, of course, the spiritual meaning, right? And so it was believed that there was this big, these big mounds. There were these, how they have the mounds over there in those countries.
Right.
And those mounds, right, would open up, and the spirits would come out, the good spirits and the good entities, right? And they come from above. And that's where the saying, as above, so below, comes from. Okay.
Okay.
And you hear a lot of pagans say, as above, so below. That's
Right.
exactly where it originated. So, they would eat pork or wild boar because they believed it was a sacred food. And it had to be cooked in a cauldron because the cauldron represented the uterus of the goddess, and it had magical powers, right? And, and every year I'm outside with, it's the only time I use my cauldron, but I'm outside, cooking pork in my cauldron.
Oh, cool.
And so, I mean, today, the cauldron has many other magical purposes, but it still goes back to the cauldron always having been a sacred tool. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was cool. So, they believe that it happened that the entities would come out, right? because the veil between our world and the spiritual world is at its very thinnest, right? And they can walk beside us, we can walk beside them, okay? And that was why they believed the mountain, okay? And so anyway, but they also believed that bad spirits would come out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And things like masking, you know, putting on masks, they were very, very paranoid about bad spirits, right?
Gotcha.
And the priests would wear masks as an attempt to scare off the evil entities. So that's where we get the mask, okay?
Right.
And the guising, so people would go door to door and they would ask for food and donations that they could give to the dead or give to the poor.
Okay.
And people believe that if they gave food or money, that they would have a prosperous year. If not, something bad would happen to them. And that's where we get trick or treat from. So that's where the guising comes from. And, you know, that opens up, and I'm going to talk about this later because I started looking at all the beliefs in Europe and throughout Europe, and I'll talk about this later, but throughout Europe, you know, they also believe that the fairies, you know, you got fairies in Ireland, you got fairies in Scotland. I didn't know that the Brits believed in the fairies too, you know, and
yeah.
and so the fairies would come out. So in different countries, the fairies had different lore to them. And like in one country, you have good fairies and you have bad fairies. In another country, they believe that fairies will neither go to heaven or hell because when the fallen angels fell, that the fairies sided with neither side. So they can't go to heaven or hell, right?
That's interesting.
And people like in Scotland believe that theirs are the worst fairies ever, you know. So it's kind of interesting that the fairies are able to, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about them because the lore is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's I'll go into that too, but our ancestors, the deceased, right? They will usually try to find their way back home. And that's why we have little lights. The little lights are to help, you know, guide them, right?
Right.
The bonfires, though, on the other hand, were ignited and set everywhere to scare off the evil entities. So that's where we get that. Jack-o'-lantern, that comes from the Irish belief that there was a man named Jack. And Jack was like a very, 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 very stingy man. I mean, he was, you know, he made Scrooge look like a generous guy. And Jack also played practical jokes on the devil, right?
Wow.
So until Judgment Day, he was banned from heaven because of his stinginess, and he was banned from hell because he's pissing off the devil, right? So until Judgment Day, he is forced to wander the earth, and he has a light to help him lead his way. That's where we get the jack-o'-lantern. Now, when we compare that to why is it in a pumpkin, okay? So that whole thing came from Scotland, and they would get these turnips, and they would call them boogies. So that's kind of where we get the term boogeyman from.
Gotcha.
So boogies, right? And they were, you know, turnips, and you know they, you know, scoop all the interesting icky stuff in the, you know, and then carve faces on them and put lights on them. So we've got a combination of, you know, jack-o'-lantern and the boogies, right? So what do we do here? We put lights in pumpkins and give them, and we call the pumpkins jack-o'-lanterns. So that's kind of where that came from. So the Catholic Church forced the pagans to convert to Catholicism, but they have also made a lot of compromises. And I don't know if anybody's seen a lot of Catholic cathedrals, but a lot of them have pagan images outside. For instance, you might see gargoyles, right?
Right. Yeah.
That's a compromise between the pagans and the Catholics. So the Catholics had to bend for a lot of things. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Compromise. I'm not giving them credit because, I don't like the way they force people into Christianity to their own beliefs, but
Right.
The Catholics compromise by saying, okay, we'll make November 7 All Hallows Day or All Hallows Eve, All Saints, and they wanted to merely celebrate the Catholic saints.
Right.
Play Samhain. And St. Augustine, so he was like around 400, the year 400, 350, 400. He decided, no, let's honor all the deceased. Let's make it the Day of the Dead, right? So now we're pushing that day up a little forward. So the absolute compromise then for Halloween, right, or All Souls Day, the Day of the Dead, so that it is actually the Christian version of our Samhain. You know what I mean? And it is a compromise. But it wasn't called Samhain, it was called like All Holy Day, All Hallows Eve, and stuff like that. Okay. So ancestors were free to return to their earthly homes. And we're going to get into that later with one certain culture, which is really, really interesting.
Oh, okay.
Malevolent spirits come out too. And I have to tell you a story that happened to me yesterday. It was just totally bizarre. And then I'll go back to what I was talking about. So I had told a friend of mine, I've seen a lot of stuff in my life. I was born and raised into a magical household of Santeria and Palo and Cuban brujeria, and everything was, but I've never seen anything on Samhain that ever was, a big deal. I do everything, that we do. I eat my pork and, all this other stuff, but I've never really seen anything. Right. So yesterday, October 17th, was the full moon closest to October 31st, and it was also a super moon. And so I go to, and I'm not crazy, trust me, I don't have hallucinations or illusions or anything like that. And, I'm a very scientific person. I have a master's degree in nursing. Even when I do readings, I always separate, what is scientific, what is actually psychological, and what is actually psychic or supernatural. So that's my way of thinking. And so I'm not crazy. The story I'm going to tell you sounds a little crazy. So I go to the grocery store yesterday and I got my shopping cart. And there's this woman, she's got like medium long hair, like maybe to shoulder length. Okay. I saw the back of her and she had blonde hair, blonde, not white, but blonde. And the reason I noticed her is because she didn't have a shopping cart and she wasn't really looking for anything. She seemed to be wandering. And I don't know, she just caught my attention. And when she turned around, she had the face of like a 70-year-old woman, but she looked like flesh and blood person to me. Right. And I'm thinking, I wonder what she's looking for, And so, but everywhere I go, she kept getting in my way. For some funny reason, she was always in front of me. Like, it's like, what the hell? So it was irritating me. It's like, this lady's a pain in the ass. It was really irritating. So I got in front of her at the end of one aisle. I got in front of her and I walked super duper fast. Okay. I'm 5'3", I weigh 105 pounds, and I'm like Speedy Gonzalez, right? So I didn't talk to her. I didn't say excuse me or anything because she wasn't, I had that much room that I could. And I hurried and got into the other aisle. And then I walked fast because it wasn't the aisle that I wanted.
Right.
And guess at the end of the aisle who's in front of me? That woman. And I'm thinking, how the hell did she get in front of me?
Right.
The end of the other aisle, and it's like, that's weird. She couldn't have walked that fast because she would have to have turned around on the aisle she was in, walk really, really fast, and then turn around and get in front of me. And it was just impossible because I
Right.
passed her up. Okay. So anyway, I'm looking for hot dogs because they ran out of hot dogs for a long time. I think they were recalled in certain stores, and my dogs eat hot dogs for breakfast, right? So, it's like, oh my God, they got hot dogs. So I lost track of that lady, and I'm like, okay, I gotta get all these packages. And then I go to get in line, and there's one person in front of me and nobody behind me. And I will talk to wallpaper if it'll listen to me. Now the cashier and I, it's my turn. Nobody's behind me. He and I are having this long, involved conversation about hot dogs. Okay. Got to tell him how I feed my dogs hot dogs in the morning, and then big conversation about what I feed them at night and what they feed their dogs in Germany. Okay, big conversation. I happen to notice peripherally that she's by the door waiting for somebody. Okay. I thought, oh, there's that pain in the ass lady again. Okay. And so blah, 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 hot dogs, hot dogs, hot dogs. And then I leave, right? And she's not there. I go to the parking lot to my car, and I pass her up. She's still walking. Now, this lady bought nothing at the store. So I get in my car, I unload my hot dogs. I get in the car. She's still in the parking lot wandering. Okay. Whatever the hell she's doing. I pull out, and I have to get to a busy street first to get to my place. Okay. And when you know where you live and you've been to the store 100 times, the fastest way to do this and that and that and this. I get on the street, no traffic, no nothing on my side. Okay. And then I turn on to another street, and then I turn on to the street that leads to my subdivision. That street is a dirt road, and it's narrow. So there's no parking on either side for what would be about 3 blocks. So after the 3 blocks, then we're paved again, right? So we're called a bedroom community. So I turned into the dirt road, and you have to do it slowly because it's narrow and you don't want to hit somebody coming out.
Right.
Guess who's in front of me? Wandering. That lady. Oh, yeah.
That's so weird.
Okie dokie. She's not a person.
Right.
So what I did was I swerved a little bit. Now, we're talking, this is all slow because you're driving slow on that dirt road, right?
Right.
I moved over a little bit to the left to get out of her way. She comes running towards the passenger side of my door.
Oh my gosh.
And I just kept going, and, my concern was, and these things don't frighten me because I've done exorcisms. I'm not afraid of this stuff. Okay.
Right.
But the one thing that crossed my mind, the first thing was, this could be a demon trying to trick me. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Can I help you? Okay. If you ever come up to a demon and say, can I help you? That's an invitation. Now you're stuck with that son of a bitch forever until you can get an exorcism, right? They'll end up possessing you in 3 different stages. So I was like, oh, no, you don't. I'm not having any even if I rolled the window down just to see what she wanted, they will view that as an invitation if she is a demon. Okay. And I'm like, oh, no, lady, screw you. It didn't scare me. It was like, okay, she wanted me. So then I called our mutual friend, and she couldn't even get a feeling on it. She goes, maybe, just maybe, I'm not saying, maybe it was someone that, a wandering spirit that needed help, And then I called another witch friend, and he was like, I have no idea what the hell that was, but I'm pretty convinced, that I think the more I thought about it, because I felt a little guilty last night. I thought, I could have helped it cross over, but the more I thought about it, the more I thought, you know what? I think this was a demon. It was just like, I just really, really do. I think it was trying to trick me. And that's what people have to be concerned about on Samhain. Okay. They randomly invite people in, right? They don't say, this meal that I'm putting out for you is specifically for, Aunt Sally Jones or Uncle John Doe, right? They just put it out. Well, you're inviting anybody. And another problem I have, because when we have neophytes, okay, and they're, October witches, just once a year, they're,
Right.
let's get the Ouija board, and call on spirits. Well, I've told people over and over and over and over again, the Ouija board is just a board with a planchette. That's all. It's a board that's got numbers and letters, and there's a planchette.
Right.
The problem is the operator. Okay. I call on any spirit that will help me, or I call on my Aunt Sally. Oh yeah, a demon comes, I'm your Aunt Sally. Yeah, well, what proof do you have that's your Aunt Sally? You know what I mean? And I don't know if you know this, but the movie The Exorcist, okay, that actually happened to a boy. And how that all started was he and his aunt, he just recently died. He became a rocket scientist, but he and his aunt were screwing around with the Ouija board. She dies. Now there's knocking, and if you hear 3 knocks, that's usually a demon mocking the Holy Trinity. You don't answer the knocks. You don't answer someone calling your name, but they hear the knock. Oh, that's Aunt Harriet, the one that, they used to play with the Ouija board, right? And now they're having conversations with Aunt Harriet, who was really a demon, okay? And hey, that's an invitation, right?
Oh my goodness.
People have to be really, really careful, especially on Samhain, okay? And then you still had that activity going on for a few days,
Right.
And, you got to be really, really careful. Here I am, a person that, I've done exorcisms, I don't scare easily, I'm more afraid of my dogs when they're hungry than I am that, but, I'm like my mother. You just don't get reactions from me. Okay. And, here's somebody that tried to trick me, of all people, me. Don't you, if that was a priest, I think the priest would have stopped, a Catholic priest. I mean, if it's a legitimate priest. I think if it's somebody that, and I really do have a good heart, don't get me wrong, but okay, I knew what she was once she showed up on that dirt road. Okay.
Right.
Before then, I didn't know. But, maybe I would have stopped had I not seen her earlier. You know what I mean? Like, do you need help, lady? There's your invitation. What do demons take seriously? I'm not leaving. I was invited.
Oh.
So very, very careful about those invitations. Okay. Moving on about Samhain. Okay.
Oh, stay on that subject for a while though, because that is so fascinating to me. And I think there is so much knowledge that you have on that subject that could really be shared because, like, it's interesting. Like, you kept running into her, right?
Mhm.
In this grocery store. Did she ever look at you or acknowledge you? See,
No.
that's weird.
And I was just like, I was kind of mumbling to myself. I wasn't thinking, and I was mumbling, and like, it's her again. What a pain in the ass. I kept saying that.
Right.
Then I got a little bit louder, hoping she would hear me.
Right.
Okay, I was like, she's in my way again. She was
Right.
always in my way.
Right.
No, no, never direct eye contact. Never, never. That one time I looked at her, I didn't bother to look at her eyes. I just wanted to know what was behind that blonde hair, you know?
Right.
And because it just kind of looked inappropriate. The hair was really pretty, like it would belong to an 18-year-old. You know what I mean?
Oh, right. Just didn't fit.
And the way she was dressed really weird. I mean, she was dressed like someone dug her up. I mean, just crummy clothes. And then she had, I don't know what you call this, but those vest jackets that are puffy, and it was sleeveless. And it
Okay.
was like, that didn't even make any sense either because it was chilly. I mean, I would be wearing a jacket or, because when I go out, because I want to show off my Halloween stuff, I'll wear 3 shirts underneath because I got to wear my Halloween. But I mean, she just didn't look right. The hair was too perfect and it wasn't a wig. And I'm sure of that also. It's like, and that's what caught my attention was that beautiful hair. And
Right.
then when she turned around, I was like, ooh, that hair doesn't match that face. You know what I mean? So that was kind of weird. Makes me wonder now, if it was the spirit of somebody, that, because, demons don't have spirits. Demons are entities. Demons were never alive. You can have malicious entity or spirits that are alive, but demons, no. You know what I mean? So maybe she did die a young girl. I don't know. I don't know.
Do you think, would it have been considered an invitation if you would have said, "Excuse me," to her in the grocery store?
No,
Would that be considered?
no,
No.
no.
Oh,
There's no where's a verbiage or any of the think about your gestures and your verbiage. So let's say, and I always tell people, and I'm talking about any time. I'm not just talking about this time of year. Okay.
right.
If you hear a knock at the door, don't open it. Look through your peephole.
Right.
Okay. And this happens to me a lot. I'll hear 1, 2, 3, and you'll hear them in threes
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, I have heard
I'll look through the peephole and I'll be like, okay, nobody invited you here. Okay, so even if they come and try to get you, seduce you into having a conversation, the first thing you ought to say is, nobody invited you here. Leave. You have to remind them that they did not get an invitation. However, what if I had opened that door? They view that as an invitation. If I had rolled the window down for that lady, if she was a demon, that's an
right.
invitation. So you have to watch your gestures and your verbiage. But saying things like "excuse me," there's no invitation in that grammar, in that verbiage,
Right.
right? But may I help you? Do you need help? What can I do for you?
Right.
If
Like,
someone said Whitney, and I always say, if you hear your name, don't answer it. Okay. If you say yes, what? That's an invitation in their eyes.
wow, I hear my name a lot, which is funny.
Okay. So left ear is, and it's so funny because I'm deaf in my left ear from the Air Force and loud airplanes and stuff.
Ah, right.
But if you hear things on the left side, it's usually malicious. It's a malicious entity. And if, I was a trauma nurse for many, 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 many years. And all of us nurses agree that when people die on their left side, you know, they weren't that good of a person. You know what I mean? And that's always things to consider too. But I had one friend, not a friend, I had a client, and he told me about a friend of his that there's something, somebody took a picture of him, and there was like this little black thing by his left ear. And he was having all kinds of bad luck. And he showed me the picture, and I'm like squinting. I'm like, okay, I gave the picture to a friend of mine who is does photography, that specialized shit.
Right.
He blew it up. Okay. I'll be a son of a gun. There was like, it looked like a bat, but it had like a kind of a human face.
Oh, that's creepy.
And it was just hanging on. And it was really, I deleted the picture because I can see the man's face, and that would be, he could sue me if I showed that around. You know what I mean? So,
Right.
I mean, and
That just gave me chills.
yeah, but it's like, I'm not a pagan. I believe in God. I don't believe in the Catholic Church. I do believe in the Catholic religion, but I also very much believe in the African derivative religions and traditions, and that's has a Christian base when it's here. You know what I mean? And
right.
So I'm not, but when I do exorcisms or, I was on that program, Michigan Hell House, I had to close a portal. I do it in a Christian manner. And he refused to let me help him, even though he was having all these problems, right? And we blew up the picture, showed him what was there.
Right.
He acknowledged it. He said, I'm not doing this because I don't believe in God. But you acknowledge, you got some sort of demonic thing hanging on to you. All these horrible things are happening. So you believe in that, but you don't believe in the opposite. You know what I mean? So that will tell you something too. That will tell you something about the person's personality. A lot of people, demons will always attack the weakest link. You know what I mean? So if you're very, very ill, they view you as the weakest link. If you're a drug abuser, I'm not talking about a drug user, but a drug abuser, an addict, okay?
Right.
You're the weakest link. If you have severe psychological problems, you're the weakest link. If you have a horrible self-esteem, and depression, things like that, you're the weakest link. And they'll find a way to seduce you. Okay, so they do it in different ways. What's the best way to seduce a nurse? Act as an old lady wandering aimlessly. That's the only thing that could cross my mind.
Right. Do you think when you were telling the friend that you never had anything weird happen on Samhain that it was like a red flag or like a bell or red flag of like, let's try it and see?
Yeah, maybe somebody heard me. Yeah, exactly. Because it happened the next day. It was like, holy crap. Okay. And I told my friend, I said, in the future, I'll just keep my mouth shut. And then the weird thing, and I know this has to do with the moon, but as an ER nurse, we used to see not just during Samhain, but every single full moon. The full moon has a gravitational pull, as you know, with the tidal waves and all that. And we're mostly water, so they have a gravitational pull on us too, right? And I'll tell you, every pregnant woman on the planet will go into false labor, right? But it brings out the Looney Tunes too. What I noticed yesterday, and this has never happened before, my two dogs go outside and do their business and come back in, and they don't bother me again for another couple of hours, right? In and out, in and out, in and out, in and out, all night long.
They were
To the
unsettled.
point that I almost gave them a tranquilizer. And isn't that interesting? It happened during a super moon.
Right. Right.
And I got paranoid because I'm opening the door wall. I'm opening the door wall. So now I'm spraying every time I'm spraying with Florida water or I'm spraying with holy water. So like, I don't want anything entering my house, and those are
Right.
things you can avoid, by, if you do open a door wall on a mystical night, all you have to do is yell, no one's invited in this home. You know what I mean? I
Gotcha.
always recommend that if you're going to honor your ancestors, which is a great time, okay,
Right.
feed them outside. I always say feed them outside. You know what I mean? And, you know, that's what I do. That it's better safe than sorry. And I'm going to tell you about feeding demons. And then we'll go back to my Samhain thing. So a client calls me one day and she's in really, really big trouble, doesn't know what to do, calls me. She had called a pseudo metaphysical practitioner and told him that her son was talking to this spirit named John. Okay. Now, doesn't that sound suspicious to you? And so, anyway, she wants to know who John is. And he says, the fake guy says, well, it's obviously the Apostle John. Okay. Oh, that's wonderful. Now, this is what I want you to do. I want you to put up an altar, put out food and water for John, and welcome him in your home. So she and the son did that together. He then says to the little boy, can I bring all my friends? And they're like, sure, yeah. Now they're putting out more food, right? And for people that don't understand, they go, well, how the hell do spirits eat food? What they're doing is they're taking the essence of that food out, okay? It's not like they're sitting there, but you will notice a lot of us witches notice that a lot of times if we put out a beverage, we'll see that there's bubbling or we'll see that it's lowered, there is some sort of a sip there, but they take the essence out. Well, guess what? Now our house is infested with demons.
Oh my
Oh,
goodness.
gee, can you help me? Well, no, I don't live in the state that you live in. So we had to call around, and I finally found an Indian reservation because I wanted, it's hard to get a Catholic exorcist. It really, really is. And I think
Right.
there's only 153 in this country.
Well,
And
they have to go through like so many levels to
you
even
have to
get
go through so
through.
many levels, right? But how many levels do you have when there's only 153 that do it?
Right.
Okay. So, I mean, the levels, most of the people get dismissed. A lot of times, the priest won't even talk to the person.
Right.
It's just like really, really shitty. So we tried everything, and I wanted a Native American shaman is what I wanted. I wanted not somebody that just learned shamanism. I wanted someone who was
Right.
trained since they were a baby, right? And we
Right.
finally, and even he and his tribe had a hell of a time getting rid of them. They're there's an old saying that once you invite them into play, it's hard for them to go away, and you got to be really, really careful with that. So be careful. It's great to honor your ancestors. It's great to do all this stuff on Samhain, but
Right.
be careful with what you say. You
Right.
know, one of the most popular things that I've heard throughout the years is I call on any spirit that will help me.
Right.
Now, guess who's coming to dinner, baby?
Right. Right. Yeah. Oh wow. Gosh, that's just exhausting to think about what that shaman and his tribe had to go through. Like, I just feel drained even just thinking about the effort that had to go into that.
Yeah, I mean, I've had in my book, I only talk about three, exorcisms, but the one, so I was trying to short, I'm not going to go on and on and on and on. And I had this little old lady, I mean, very Tiny, she beat the shit out. She was possessed. She beat the living crap out. I mean, she beat the shit out of me. You know what I
Oh
mean?
my
You got to be
God.
careful because it's, you know, and it's dark. It's really, 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 really dark. It's so dark that you can't even discuss it, is how dark it is. You know what I
Right.
mean? And, you know, these people, they lose their mind. You know, there's 3 stages to a demonic possession. Okay. The first stage is called infestation. So that's where they're kind of hanging out with you. Okay. And
Okay.
the second stage is called oppression. I akin it to an attachment. You know what I mean? So they're attached. The third
Gotcha.
stage is the actual possession. Okay. Well, in the second stage of oppression, you'll get things like vexation. Well, they'll start hurting themselves. Well, they're not really hurting themselves. The demon is making the person hurt themselves, right? And then
Right.
the third stage is the actual possession where they actually take control, you know.
And take
And their whole MO, their whole modus operandum is to destroy you and then destroy other people around that person. You know what I
right.
mean? But they don't start out that way. They start out as your friend and loving, and I'm your good friend and I'm going to help you. And I talk about this a lot on my Facebook page. I do. If you go to my Facebook page, Miss Aida Psychic, I've got like 63 videos that, you know, if you go to the more drop down and then it shows videos, I talk about this a lot. I mean, I do a lot of free magical coaching about everything else, but you know, my audience, you know, I call them my friends. They're, you know, they're my followers. They're actually my friends. It's like a big family over there. And, you know, I often warn about be careful with what you do, be careful with what you say, be careful with what you offer. You know what I mean? And
Right.
the thing is on Samhain and during this time of activity, wear extra protection. You know, if you're in the Wicca, wear that pentacle. You know what I mean? If you're Christian, wear your cross. If you're Muslim, wear your anti-evil eye stuff or your Hamsa hand, but wear some protection. You know what I mean? And for me, I always put holy water on the back of my head and the back of my neck, okay? Because
Oh,
when entities try to enter, that's where they attach first. Okay, so you got to be careful with that.
that's good to know, actually. That's really good to know.
Yeah. So let
Okay.
me finish this summer thing, Earl, because I'm talking your head off. Okay,
No,
so
I have so many more questions though. So yeah, we
okay, go ahead, go ahead. We can go ahead.
well, okay, so how can you tell the difference? Because you mentioned like the second stage of possession is like having an attachment. So how are there ways to tell the difference between having an attachment versus having a demon possession in the second stage?
No, because what happens is all these stages can, you know, I mean, the first stage is like where they're just really bugging you, okay? And the person might, I'm not sure if I understand the question. Repeat the question. I
So
know the answer, I'm just not understanding the question.
so like there's the demon possession in the second stage.
No,
And
the second stage of possession is oppression.
yes, oppression.
Okay, in oppression, all right.
So how can you tell the difference between the oppression stage versus somebody having an attachment that's not necessarily demonic?
Oh, you know, basically they abhor any type of religious prayers. Um, if you bring religious articles, they don't want any part of it. They may start speaking languages that they never spoke before. You know what I mean?
Right.
Um, I have a book called Hoodoo Cleansing and Protection Magic, and I have a whole list of what happens in each stage and how you can tell. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
wow.
What
Okay.
you can't tell, okay, in the first and second stage, what you can't tell unless you're right there is it a mental illness?
Right.
So whenever exorcisms, professional exorcisms are done, they have to see a psychiatrist first. And the reason I am emphasizing the word psychiatrist is because this is a physician who also did a 4-year residency in that realm of psychiatry.
Right.
A psychologist, on the other hand, are not physicians. And these people need a physical checkup because there's a lot of things, a lot of physiological diseases, which we call disease, but it's really dis-ease, right? That mimic a demonic possession. So you have to ascertain, do they have any of these physiological illnesses? And you have to ascertain, do they have any of these psychological illnesses? Because schizophrenia is one of the biggies that you can mistake for possession. But a lot of times I'll get people that tell me totally bizarre things, and I know they're not possessed. Okay. There's ways for me to tell, like if I'm talking to them on the phone, okay, I can tell within 5 minutes if it's their imagination or if something's going on. Now, usually what you'll see, when the one versus the other, is the one that actually has a demon around it won't tell you. It'll be the behaviors. Okay. It's almost like, I'm all right. I'm all right. I'm all right. You got, on the other hand, the person that is seeing this demon and that demon and da 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 da. The other thing that's a warning sign too is that demons, there's millions and millions and millions of demons, right? And they are in a hierarchical structure. Okay. So I always compare it to the military, because I was in the military. And what you have, the wide end of the bottom, you have the weakest demons, the very, very weakest ones. And I call them the soldiers. And then I want to do it so I can see. So then you move up and you've got the sergeants that are a little bit stronger. Then you move up and you've got the lieutenants, and then you've got the captains and the majors and the colonels, and then you got the generals, and then your president is Satan right on top, right? What do these weaker demons like to do? They like to say, when you ask them on an obulus or a geoport or something, or even an EVP, what's your name? My name is Satan. Well, here's a news flash, okay? Satan isn't going to show up, just like President Obama, President Trump, President Biden. They're not going to show up, okay?
Right.
I mean, but they love to say that, okay? But when I compared the structure, I also said there's generals, right? And I don't like repeating their names, but you've got quite a few of them. You've got, the 10 most popular ones. I call them the generals. Oh, I'm talking to B, I'm talking the as, I don't want to say their names, okay? It's like, no, you're not. You know what I mean? So you have to be careful. Even though the lesser ones will say they are. Let me finish about the possession too. So what happens is you invite the lesser demons in, they're the weakest ones. They invite stronger demons in. Okay. So when you're possessed, when you're in an actual possession, you don't have just one demon in you. Okay. You got a shitload. And then when you do an exorcism, what happens is the lesser ones leave first because they're the weakest.
Right.
I mean, so it's like, you don't know how many you're fighting off. If you look in the Bible, there was some guy that was possessed, right? And Jesus said, what's your name? He thought he was talking to one demon, and they answered Legion. So there were a shitload of them in this guy. So then when Jesus did the exorcism, they all ran into the pigs, and the pigs ran into the water and drowned themselves, So you always keep in mind that, the lesser demons, they're going to be the ones that are hanging out for the attack or for the infestation where they're bothering you. You know what I mean? And then they'll, hey, party time, So your body is the house, right?
Oh my
Come
gosh.
on down. So they join, and that's how it happens. And when there's an attachment, hey, we got a free horseback ride here. Everybody come along, and then they keep joining and keep joining. So it isn't like you're doing an exorcism for one demonic entity. You're doing an exorcism for you don't know how many.
Right.
But when you start out and you start getting rid of them, there's a point where you might now only have a couple in you. And then you want their names. That's what you have to fight for, But
Gotcha.
when anybody says, my name is John, my name is Joe, my name is, those type of names, be cautious. Okay.
Right.
Because it's coming out of their ass. They're just making up names.
Right.
So yeah, there's ways to tell. I mean, it's a complicated answer because I would keep you here for hours explaining to you, well, this has to happen and that has to happen. You know what I mean?
Wow.
So
Right.
a possession, actual possession, the third stage, you're going to see all kinds of stuff. You're going to see, they're going to know things about you. They're going to always attack your weakest point. Then,
Right.
we all have our skeletons in our closet. For me, it's, my nose and stuff like that. So they know that. And
Right.
man, you got an ugly nose. I'm 105. I'm 5'3", so I'm a little conscientious. I'm always trying to gain weight. And boy, you're so skinny. You're ugly. They know what your weaknesses are. So you have to put on a tough skin. And they know your skeleton. They know the skeletons in your closet. You know what I
Right.
mean? So, I always recommend if you do even encounter one of them, don't engage in any conversations and don't pay attention. Don't listen. If you're listening to them, they're going to get to you. You know what I mean? Because if somebody's going to insult me, I'm going to be listening.
Right.
Try not to do that. Okay. It takes experience, but just don't do it. Don't laugh. Don't anything. Just keep, a lot of times they'll do this while you're praying. Keep praying. Just ignore them like they didn't even talk. They didn't even say anything. Yeah.
So when they first are showing up in like the first part where they're just talking to you or trying to get your attention,
Yeah.
do they pretend to be like your loved ones helping you or
Your
angels
best friend,
or your spirit guides
oh
or
yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. They love that one. The spirit guide. They love the guardian angel thing. Oh yeah, they love the ancestor thing. So you have to be very careful. You know what I mean? So it's I recommend and honor your ancestors. And that's where most of us metaphysical practitioners, no matter what realm we've come from, we all honor our ancestors, right? So
right,
what's the important thing? You call them out by name. You say prayers. You know what I mean?
right.
And those prayers will chase away anything that's bad. You know what I mean? So that's what you got to do. You just got to be a little prudent about how you do things, but I'm vehemently against doing anything like table tipping and Ouija boards for people that are inexperienced. There's one dude, really, he was my friend at one time, and I lost all respect. I blocked him. He was going to school and giving grade school kids, is that what you call them, grade school children? Giving them lectures on different Ouija boards. And that really pissed me off. You don't
They're
do that.
so dangerous.
Pardon me?
They can be so dangerous just to be kind of like encouraging that.
Exactly. And who has better access to that realm? They do, because they just recently left that realm. That's why
Right.
children are more psychic than adults are. You know
And
what I
they're
mean?
so trusting.
Yes. Well, look at that little boy having conversation with John. The whole time it was a demon.
Oh my goodness. Ooh.
My mother wouldn't let me have dolls. I never had a doll ever, because she believed that I'll start an interaction with a doll, a demon might enter, and guess what? You got an invitation. So I
Wow.
wasn't allowed. And a lot of my African American friends, interestingly enough, their parents didn't let them have dolls either if they were hoodoo practitioners. You know what I mean? So that They're
Wow.
hungry. Let me go on. I'll just go real quick over this, and then
Yeah, thank you. This has been, I could
yeah.
talk
So
forever.
let me just finish this real quick because I wanted to tell you what goes on in these different countries. Okay.
Yeah.
So in Ireland, going to the fairies, because I said I would get back to that. Okay. They believe that fairies lived in grassy mounds called forts. Okay. And the forts were entrances to the underground treasure houses
Oh,
and opened up only during the time of Samhain. So if you're going to try and they would be out roaming. So if you want to rip them off, that's the best time to do it. Okay. In Scotland, they believe that any child born on Samhain had an exceptional ability to converse with spirits. Okay. So you can imagine children already do, right? And
right,
now these kids that are born on that day, they even, but I'm not talking about October 31st. I'm talking about the full moon closest to October 31st.
right.
Okay. And in Scotland, they believed that if you sat at a crossroad with that were three crossroads, not four, but three, and you sat in a stool that had three legs, you could watch the goblin or the fairies crossing. Remember, I told you that in Scotland they had the worst fairies, right? And you can hear them. You can not only see them, but you'll hear them whispering people's names. And
Oh,
those names will be the people that will die within that year.
oh, wow.
And they also believe that they had a goblin, and I did write this down because I couldn't figure out how to pronounce it. Um, he was an ugly, horrible creature named Samhanak. Samanak.
Ooh,
And he only came out during Samhain to hurt people. They also believe that evil witches that made deals with the devil, right?
right.
And this is something I didn't know. I was very shocked. So they would make deals with the devil, and on Samhain they would meet with the devil to have a party, right? And it was believed, and evidently throughout history, it did happen. We always, they always talk about their besoms that were anointed, with something, and they had a magical potion, which we all know now that it was a hallucinogen belladonna, right?
Right.
But what I didn't know was that they would murder babies and use the fat. These are satanic, which, the ones that they would take the fat of the babies and anoint their broomsticks and anoint themselves with it because fat allows you to absorb drugs faster. So remember that belladonna, you know what I mean? So
Right,
yeah,
right.
they would murder the babies and use their fat. And that's a historical fact that they did murder babies. You know what I mean? So then they'd meet with the devil, who would always enter riding a goat. And we're talking about Scotland, right? And the devil would play a bagpipe, and the witches would all dance and drink their libations through the skulls of horses. Those were their cups.
Wow.
You know?
Wow.
So I'll give you a couple of divinatory things. We're still in Scotland, and they're big because Samhain is known throughout the world as a great time for divination. And, it's more accurate, especially love divination, right? It's a good time, the best time to get readings. It's the best time to get your magic to work. And I told everybody on my Facebook, make sure you wear your amulets, your talismans, and your charms, because they'll get those extra charges, from the Samhain season. Okay. So what they did in Scotland for love divination is people would come out and cover up kale stalks, right? And whether you're a man or a woman, okay, you would go out and now you're pulling a kale stalk. You don't know because it's covered. So when they would uncover it, it would disclose the shape of the person you're going to marry. So if it was skinny and scrawny, then your spouse would be skinny and scrawny. If it was heavy, your spouse would be heavy. If it was stumpy, so they did that, okay, on in Scotland. The other thing they did in Scotland for love divination, it was for men, right? They would have 3 bowls. And one bowl had fresh water. Now, this is just for men. One bowl had dirty water, and one bowl was empty. So then they would blindfold the man and kind of just turn him around, not spin around and make him dizzy. But when they turn around, then they mix the bowls up. He had to put his hand in one of them, right? If he put his hand in the fresh water, he was going to marry a maiden. If he put his hand in the dirty water, and this is where I resent this because my husband died in 97. If you put your hand in the dirty water, you're going to marry a widow. If you put your hand in the empty bowl, you're not getting married that year. So that was it.
Wow.
So, yeah, in England, they believed that their fairies were neither fit for heaven or hell, which I did tell you. But they also believed that in the 6th century that in England, they believed that the sun god became Saint Michael the Archangel. They believed that in England, and they believed that happened in that 6th century. So bonfires in all of these countries that I've mentioned were prevalent to chase away the evil spirits. Small lights were to guide your ancestors. So in South Wales, there was death divination too. So there was like a Druid temple there in South Wales, and it's still today it's still marked with these stones, a stone circle. But back then, and they still, even now they do this, is people would mark a stone, right? So, I would put my initials on the stone or my name, whatever. And as the bonfire, started to burn out, they would throw their stones in there. So in the next day, when it was like just ashes and it was cooled off, they would try to retrieve their stones. If their stone was missing, it foretold their death that year. Okay. So they believe that. And they also believe that stone circle were actually the stone circle that still marks that area. They also believe that they were once human and that those satanic witches converted them into stones and they can wander out on Samhain. Okay. In France and its neighbor Brittany, okay, it was believed that they had the longest pagan belief was the cult of the dead. Okay. And this is because the Celts of Gaul were believed to be descendants of the god of death. So they believed that on Samhain, their homes were just loaded with the spirits of dead people because, of their history. And in Italy, people dressed in black and rang bells on the street corners to pray for the souls of the dead. And in Salerno, Italy, they would have banquets. And, we see that where in Latin America, we see that, they have Dia de los Muertos or something like that. In Spain, they would go to the grave and they would put food on the grave sites for every grave site just to bribe the spirits not to bother them. Okay, so
okay.
And then the last thing I have here is that what they used to practice in the USA, and I think this is cute, is you sit on the sofa. If there's, you can't do it in your own house. You got to do it at a friend's house. So if your friend has a cat, right, you come over, you sit on the sofa. If the cat sits next to you and nice and peaceful, you're going to have a peaceful year. If the cat snuggles up to you, you're going to have good luck for the rest of the year. If the cat jumps on your lap, you're going to have exceptionally great luck for that year. If the cat runs away from you, a deep, dark secret that you have will be revealed within 7 days. So, it's a lot of different things. I just covered a few. I mean, they've got different divinatory practices and all these different things. But I didn't know about the cat thing in the USA. I thought that was interesting.
That is interesting. When do you have any idea of the time frame on when that one came about or when they were practicing?
That one I think was in the early 1900s. You got to remember something. We didn't really here in the USA. We didn't really celebrate any of this. It was the Irish with the great potato famine. So they came here in the late 1900s or 1800s, and they were the ones that introduced Halloween to the children. And then Eleanor Roosevelt decided, you know what, this ought to be a holiday also for adults. But I'm talking about Halloween, October 31st. Okay.
Right.
Samhain's been sacred, for all the foreigners that came here that were from Europe all along. They just never shared that information. You know what I mean? So there you go.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you, Miss
I
Aida.
went a little over an hour. I apologize.
Oh, this has been so fascinating. I've enjoyed this so much. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom and your research. And I look forward to having you back if you're available and get to know more about you and your story because this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for this.
Okay. Thank you for having me. You
Where
have
can
a
you-
good evening. Everybody have a oh, if anybody wants to find me,
Yes.
I have a website, missaida.com. I have a Facebook page. Please like my Facebook page, Miss Aida Psychic. And I always share a lot of hoodoo information, a lot of hoodoo things that are relevant, things are cute to know, you know what I mean, lore. Sometimes I offer spell work, but I do have, I'm doing them once a month now, but I used to do them every other week. I do have a lot of training, magical coaching training videos that, they're free. And come join our family.
Awesome.
Oh, and also if you want any of my books,
Yes.
just go to Amazon and type in Miss Aida, MISS. Oh, you can see my name right there. And you'll see 5 books. And I have a new one coming out next year. So let's see what happens.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate this. This has been amazing. So thank you.
Okay. You're a pretty girl, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, sweetie. You take care.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.